Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're heading down south to Palm Beach County, Florida.
Oh, Florida, Sunshine State.
It is, but this is not a sunny story, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
We are diving into a really tough case, a car crash that tragically took the lives of 6 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it sparked just a ton of controversy in the area. And we're going to try to untangle this whole story using court documents and news reports. We even have some social media posts that kind of play into the narrative of what happened.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so, sometimes those social media posts can really, I don't know, be a real window into what's happening in the real world.
Yeah, sometimes for better or worse.
Yeah, it's true.
So at the center of this story is a 17-year-old kid, Noah Gill. And he was driving a BMW M5.
Okay.
When this crash happened. And investigators found that he was going 151 miles per hour.
Oh my God, 151 miles per hour. That's like a blink of an eye, and you've traveled a whole football field.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
It's hard to even comprehend going that fast. So this crash took place on January 27th of 2022 on State Road 7. Gill was driving northbound, and he hit a Nissan Rogue from behind.
Oh, wow.
The Nissan had 6 farm workers in it who were leaving their jobs at Perot Family Farms.
Oh, jeez.
And because of the impact of this crash at that speed, the Nissan spun around, flipped over.
All right.
Some of the passengers were thrown from the vehicle. It was really devastating. 5 of the 6 people in the Rogue died right there at the scene.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's just such a tragedy, especially, 6 families impacted by this one event.
Right, and the victims ranged in age from 29 to 77 years old.
Yeah.
We were able to find pictures online of 2 of the victims, Merlin L. Julius and Marie Louise.
Oh, wow.
And I think seeing the faces of some of the people really puts this into perspective, makes it more real.
It does humanize it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Julius's family filed a lawsuit following the crash, so there's that whole legal battle on top of everything.
So this investigation must have been quite extensive, right? I mean, trying to piece together what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it took 6 weeks to complete. And the investigators did a full vehicle reconstruction and analysis, kind of like that forensic investigation that you see on all those TV shows, but for a car crash.
Oh, wow.
So when they got to the crash site, the sheriff's deputies found Gill, the driver, with only an ankle injury.
Oh, wow.
He admitted to driving above 120, but we know from the investigation that he was going much faster, like we said, 151 miles per hour.
Right.
And the skid marks at the scene and a tire that was ripped off one of the cars, I mean, it really paints a picture of just the force of this impact. But probably the most damning piece of evidence came from Gill's own Instagram account.
Oh, social media.
Social media.
I was going to say.
Yeah. Just weeks before the crash, he had posted this video of himself driving 182 miles an hour on I-95.
I mean, what is he thinking?
I don't know, right? Bragging about it online?
I don't know if it's for attention or if he really doesn't understand the danger involved, going that fast.
Yeah, it's scary to think about. And it's not uncommon. I mean, you see videos like that all the time, and it just really makes you think about, are people doing it for attention? Are they just oblivious to the danger?
Yeah, it's a disturbing trend. And, I mean, in this case, like you said, it was that video that ended up being a big piece of evidence in the case against Gill.
Right.
And, he ended up being charged with 6 counts of vehicular homicide.
And so, maybe you could explain for our listeners a little bit. What exactly does it take to prove vehicular homicide?
So that's a really good question. Because it's not always as clear-cut as you would think,
Right.
especially in Florida. Prosecutors, they really have to be able to prove that the driver was acting recklessly.
Okay.
And here's the thing. So just going over the speed limit, even by a lot,
Right.
isn't automatically considered reckless driving by Florida law.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's all about proving that there was a willful or wanton disregard for the safety of others.
Okay.
So this could be, like driving under the influence, driving while texting, maybe ignoring traffic signals, weaving in and out of traffic.
So it has to be more than just speeding.
More than just speeding. It's got to be a pattern of dangerous behavior.
Okay, so given all of that, did the prosecutors feel like they had enough to get a conviction in this case?
Well, that's where the controversy comes in.
Okay.
So instead of going to trial, Gill took a plea agreement. He pled guilty to all 6 counts of vehicular homicide.
Okay.
But the sentence that he got, 12 years in prison,
Okay.
sparked all this outrage because people felt like it was way too lenient,
Right.
especially considering the maximum sentence for vehicular homicide in Florida is 90 years.
That's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they wondered if his family's background played a role in that outcome. Because his father is a pretty well-known attorney.
Oh, okay.
And, so people were asking, did he get special treatment? Was justice really served?
And you can see why people would think,
Absolutely. This idea that we have in our justice system that justice is supposed to be blind.
mm,
It's tough, right? Because on one hand, you have the grief of the families who lost loved ones.
mm,
But then there's also this bigger question of what is justice?
right,
Is it about punishment
right,
or is it about rehabilitation?
right.
It's not always so clear.
Yeah.
And I think, in this situation, it's important to remember that the victims' families, they were actually consulted as part of this plea agreement process.
Okay.
And so it's possible that some of the families, maybe they felt like a lengthy prison sentence, wasn't necessarily going to bring them closure.
Yeah, you never know what their desires are.
Right, exactly. And so, this case really does highlight all those nuances.
Yeah.
It exposes the limitations of our legal system when you're dealing with such a profound loss,
Mm,
but it also really underscores the need to continue this conversation about sentencing guidelines,
right.
especially for crimes that involve reckless driving and, vehicular homicide.
Yeah, how do we prevent things like this from happening in the first place?
Well, the state attorney, he made a really good point. He said, you can't have a safe community without safe streets.
Absolutely.
And that's a statement that really resonated with me. It kind of suggests this collective responsibility
Right.
that we all have to promote safe driving,
Right.
to hold each other accountable for our actions behind the wheel, to make sure that our streets are safe for everyone.
I think it's so important to shift our focus from punishment to prevention.
Absolutely.
How do we as a society address the underlying issues that contribute to reckless driving? What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I think one thing we have to look at is the role of social media.
Okay.
These platforms like Instagram and TikTok,
Hmm.
they often glorify dangerous driving. We have to create a culture where speeding and reckless behavior just aren't cool. They're not acceptable.
It's about changing the narrative.
It is.
Yeah, instead of praising speed, we need to emphasize responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. It's about education. It's about awareness. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility on the road.
What are your thoughts on that? How can we as individuals, make a difference and try to prevent these tragedies from happening again?
Well, I think each of us, we have to take personal responsibility for our actions when we're driving.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be present. We have to be mindful. We have to be respectful of other drivers,
Yeah.
pedestrians,
Well,
cyclists,
everyone.
everyone, exactly. It's about making the conscious choice to put safety above thrill-seeking or showing off.
Absolutely. And speaking up when we see others engaging in that kind of behavior, not just being bystanders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't afford to be bystanders.
Right.
We all have responsibility to look out for each other. And this case really brings that home.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder of what can happen when that responsibility is ignored.
Right. That loss of 6 lives is a wound that's going to forever impact these families and the community as a whole.
It is a tragedy.
Uh-huh.
And it forces us all to think about our own driving habits.
Right.
It challenges us to be more mindful behind the wheel
Yeah.
and to advocate for safer roads for everyone.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
And this deep dive has been really emotionally heavy.
Absolutely.
But it's also a powerful reminder of just how fragile life is
It is.
and how far-reaching the consequences of our actions can be. It's definitely a story that's going to stay with me.
Me too. And, it compels us to think really critically about justice,
Mm-hmm.
about accountability,
Right.
and about the choices that we make each and every time we get behind the wheel.
So important. Yeah, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to dive deeper into the lives of those who were lost, including Merlin Julius and Marie Louise.
Sounds good. So, we were talking about Merlin Julius and Marie Louise.
Yeah,
We couldn't find any pictures of the other 4 people who were in the Nissan with them.
right. Just heartbreaking. 6 families whose lives are changed forever in an instant.
Yeah, it really does drive home the point that this isn't just a case, in some file somewhere. It's about real people. And their lives were cut tragically short. People with families and dreams.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to the big question. Was that sentence, those 12 years, was it really enough?
Yeah, public opinion was definitely split on that.
Right.
A lot of people thought it was a slap on the wrist, especially when you consider that the maximum sentence for this crime in Florida is 90 years.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
It is. And, I think that the fact that Gill's family is wealthy, his father is a prominent lawyer,
Right.
it really fueled this perception that maybe he got off easy.
Yeah, that he got some sort of preferential treatment.
Right. And it raises all these questions about, is justice really blind?
It's a tough one, because on the one hand, you have the families of the victims who are dealing with just unimaginable grief.
Of course.
But then there's this whole other question of what does justice actually look like?
Right.
Is it about punishment or is it about rehabilitation? Is there a way to balance those two?
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that the families of the victims, they were part of the plea agreement process.
Okay.
So, it's possible that some of them, maybe they prioritize something else over a long prison sentence.
It's something that as outsiders, we just don't know
Right.
what goes into those decisions.
Exactly. And it really, this case, I think more than any other, just highlights how complicated these situations are.
Right. It's not black and white.
It's not. No, not at all. It shows how the legal system, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It has limitations, especially when you're trying to deal with such a tremendous loss.
Right. And it makes me think about how important it is to keep talking about these sentencing guidelines.
Absolutely.
Especially for reckless driving and vehicular homicide.
Yeah, I mean, how do we even prevent something like this from happening again? The state attorney, he had that really powerful statement.
Yeah, he said you can't have a safe community without safe streets.
And it really stuck with me, that statement.
Me too.
I think it just emphasizes, like we were talking about, this shared responsibility that we all have.
Right.
To drive safely, to be aware, to look out for one another.
I think it's about changing the mindset from punishment to prevention. How can we as a society try to address these issues that lead to these tragedies?
That's a big question.
It is, but it's one that we need to be asking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think social media plays a huge role in this.
Okay.
You see all these videos on Instagram, TikTok.
Glorifying speeding.
Glorifying speeding, dangerous driving. Yeah, we need to create a culture where that's just not cool.
Where it's not acceptable, it's not something to brag about.
Exactly. It's not cool to put lives at risk.
Absolutely. We need to start emphasizing responsible driving, make that the thing that's praised.
Yeah, it's about educating people, raising awareness.
Making it a shared responsibility, like you said.
Exactly. We all have to do our part to make our roads safer.
What are your thoughts on that? How can we each make a difference?
I think it starts with just taking responsibility for our own actions when we're behind the wheel. Like we were saying before, being present, paying attention, being respectful of everyone around us.
Right, pedestrians, cyclists, other drivers.
Right. It's about choosing safety over thrill-seeking or recklessness.
Choosing to protect not just ourselves, but everyone around us.
Exactly. And if we see somebody doing something dangerous, we have to say something.
We can't be bystanders.
No, we can't. And this case, tragically shows us what can happen when we do.
Yeah, the loss of those 6 lives, it's a permanent scar on those families and the community.
It's a tragedy that should never have happened.
And it forces us all to reflect on our own behavior, on the choices that we make when we're driving.
It challenges us to be better, to advocate for safer roads for everyone.
This is a story that's really stayed with me. It's emotionally heavy, but also a powerful reminder of how precious life is.
It is, and how important it is to make responsible choices.
This case really highlights how far-reaching the consequences of our actions can be.
Yeah, we have to remember that every time we get behind the wheel.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into this Palm Beach County tragedy, explore some final thoughts, and maybe some takeaways for all of us. It's easy to get lost in all the legal details.
Oh, absolutely.
But what really stood out to me was that statement that we talked about earlier from the state attorney.
Right. You can't have a safe community without safe streets.
Exactly.
Powerful words.
And it makes you think about, individual freedom versus our responsibility to each other, especially when it comes to something as potentially dangerous as driving.
Right. We all want to be able to just hop in the car and go wherever we want,
Right.
But with that freedom comes risk. Not just for ourselves, but for everybody else on the road, too.
And that's where the whole idea of accountability comes in. We need to be responsible for our actions because they could have serious consequences for other people.
Yeah, and this case, with the tragic outcome and the whole debate about the sentence, really brings up some tough questions. Like, how do we make sure people are driving safely? How do we protect innocent lives?
How do we balance those things?
Exactly.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we have to start thinking about driving differently.
Okay.
It's not a right. It's a privilege.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it comes with a big responsibility.
A responsibility to everyone else on the road.
To everyone.
Yeah.
And that responsibility, it's more than just following the rules. It's about being aware, being present, being respectful of everyone.
Pedestrians, cyclists, other drivers,
Everybody, yeah,
being mindful,
absolutely. Choosing to be safe instead of speeding or being reckless.
making choices that protect everyone, not just ourselves.
Exactly. And if we see someone doing something dangerous,
Hmm.
we can't just ignore it.
We have to speak up.
We have to say something.
This case is such a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in making our roads safer.
It really is. Our actions have consequences, sometimes very serious ones,
Mm.
and they can affect a lot of people.
It's a call to action for all of us to be more responsible drivers, to look out for each other.
To value human life.
This has been a really tough topic,
Absolutely.
but I think an important one.
Oh, for sure.
It's made me think a lot about my own driving habits, and the choices that I make every time I get behind the wheel.
I think we can all learn something from this case.
I hope this deep dive has given everyone listening something to think about too. The consequences of reckless driving, how the legal system works, and how social media can play a part in all of this. It's been a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's been heavy, but these are conversations that we need to be having.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.